It starts with a flicker of red and blue lights in the rearview mirror, a universal sign to pull over. But on a blistering, desolate stretch of West Texas highway, those lights didn't signal a routine traffic stop. They signaled a catastrophic collision of two entirely different worlds. A bitter small-town sheriff's deputy, looking for an easy target based on nothing but the color of a man's skin, was about to box in a highly classified special operations unit. He thought he had cornered a pack of street-level criminals. He just pulled over the most dangerous people on American soil. The heat rolling off the asphalt of the highway was thick enough to distort the horizon. It was a sweltering afternoon just outside the dusty outskirts of a small West Texas town. Deputy Shane Whitaker sat in his marked cruiser, the air conditioning blasting, a lukewarm coffee resting in the cup holder. Whitaker had been with the local sheriff's department for a long career. A man whose career had stagnated long ago, leaving him sour, resentful, and utterly convinced of his own unquestionable authority. Whitaker was a predator of the mundane. He thrived on the minor power trips of rural law enforcement, intimidating out-of-towners, writing up exorbitant tickets for minor infractions, and relying on his gut to pull over anyone who didn't fit his narrow, prejudiced view of who belonged in his county. Lately, his arrest numbers were down, and the sheriff had been riding him. Whitaker needed a bust. He needed someone to look guilty. Through the shimmering heat haze, a vehicle approached. It was a pristine, late-model black Chevrolet Tahoe. The windows were heavily tinted, the paint immaculate despite the dusty environment. It wasn't speeding. In fact, it was cruising at exactly the posted speed limit. Whitaker narrowed his eyes, instinctively running the plates on his dashboard computer. The system lagged, then spit back a mundane result. Registered to a fleet leasing company out of a major city. No flags, no warrants. To a normal officer, this meant nothing. To Whitaker, a fleet vehicle with dark tints moving perfectly at the speed limit screamed drug runners trying too hard to blend in. He pulled the cruiser out of the dirt median, tires kicking up a cloud of pale dust, and accelerated to catch up. He rode the Tahoe's bumper for a short distance, waiting for a mistake, a slight swerve, a failure to signal, a tap of the brakes. Nothing. The Tahoe drove with mechanical, infuriating precision. Frustrated, Whitaker pulled into the left lane and crept up beside the SUV, glaring through his passenger window. The Tahoe's front windows weren't completely blacked out. Through the glass, Whitaker saw the driver, a broad-shouldered black man in his early 30s, wearing a fitted black t-shirt. His posture was rigid and alert. In the passenger seat sat another black man, older, staring straight ahead with an intense, unbothered focus. Whitaker felt a familiar, ugly smirk pull at the corner of his mouth. Four black folks in a heavy-duty rental SUV driving through a drug corridor county, keeping their eyes locked forward. In Whitaker's twisted logic, he had just found his golden ticket. He dropped back behind the Tahoe, flipped on his sirens, and hit the lights. Inside the Tahoe, the atmosphere was entirely detached from the petty racism brewing in the cruiser behind them. The team inside did not belong to a gang, a cartel, or any civilian organization. They were a Tier 1 Joint Task Force operating under Joint Special Operations Command, detailed to the FBI for a highly classified domestic counterterrorism sweep. At the wheel was Master Sergeant Marcus Ellison, a former Army Ranger with multiple commendations. In the passenger seat sat Captain Elias Kane, the unit commander, a man whose service record was redacted so heavily it looked like a barcode. In the back was Specialist Laura Bennett, a brilliant signals intelligence operative, and Chief Warrant Officer Victor Hale, the team's heavy weapons specialist and tactical breacher. "Got a local on our 6, Ellison said, his voice a low, calm rumble. He didn't tense. His heart rate didn't even spike. He's lighting us up. Kane checked the side mirror, seeing the flashing lights cutting through the dust. He frowned, calculating the variables. They were a critical distance from a heavily fortified compound where Arthur Lang, a rogue military contractor selling stolen Department of Defense encryption keys to foreign nationals, was holding a clandestine meeting. They were operating under extreme time constraints. They had a narrow window to reach the staging area, link up with an FBI-hosted rescue team element, and breach the compound before Lang completed the digital transfer. "Any traffic violations, Marcus?" Kane asked, his eyes still glued to a ruggedized tablet displaying live satellite feeds. "Negative, Cap. Dead center of the lane, exactly at the speed limit. He was riding my bumper, then paced us, looked right at me, dropped back, and lit us up." Hale groaned from the back seat, the sound vibrating with suppressed frustration. "We're getting profiled, boss. Small-town cop looking for a promotion. Comply and de-escalate," Kane ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We do not have time for this, but blowing past him initiates a pursuit, and we lose the element of surprise on the Lang compound. Pull over. Be polite. Hand him your cover ID. Let him write his phantom ticket. And we move on." "Copy," Ellison said, easing the heavy SUV onto the gravel shoulder. They had no idea that Deputy Whitaker wasn't looking to write a ticket. He was looking for a war. The Tahoe came to a smooth halt. Dust swirled around the tires and settled against the black paint. In the cruiser behind them, Whitaker unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a traffic stop on a black Chevy Tahoe. Fleet plates. 4 occupants. Suspicious behavior. Going to make contact." "Copy. Unit 4. Be advised you are out of range for immediate backup. Unit 7 is about a short distance out." "Understood," Whitaker replied. He stepped out of his cruiser, the dry heat hitting him like a physical blow. He rested his right hand conspicuously on the butt of his sidearm, a deliberate intimidation tactic, and began his approach. He didn't walk up to the driver's side immediately. Instead, he trailed his hand along the trunk of the Tahoe, leaving a smudge in the dust, a classic police tactic to leave fingerprints on a vehicle in case it fled. Whitaker stopped just behind the driver's side pillar, leaning in to look through the glass. Ellison pressed the button, and the window glided down, letting in the stifling desert air. "Afternoon, officer," Ellison said, his voice even, respectful, and completely devoid of the nervous flutter Whitaker was accustomed to hearing. Whitaker didn't return the greeting. He stared down at Ellison, then swept his gaze to Kane in the passenger seat, and finally to the 2 figures in the back. 4 sets of eyes stared back at him. None of them looked scared. None of them were fidgeting. They possessed a terrifyingly still composure that Whitaker instantly misread. To him, calm meant they were hardened criminals accustomed to dealing with the law. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Whitaker demanded, his tone sharp and condescending. "Yes, sir," Ellison said. He moved his hand slowly and deliberately. "My license is in my back right pocket. The rental agreement is in the glove box. My passenger's going to reach for it." Whitaker bristled. "I didn't ask for a play-by-play, boy. Just hand over the documents." The word "boy" hung in the sweltering air. In the back seat, Hale shifted slightly, the muscle in his jaw feathering. Laura Bennett lowered her eyes to the floorboard, her fingers resting lightly on a concealed panic button that would instantly wipe the hard drives of their surveillance laptops. Kane remained motionless, but his eyes locked onto Whitaker. "We're just making sure there are no misunderstandings, officer. Here are the documents," Kane said. He produced the rental paperwork from the glove box, while Ellison handed a Texas driver's license out the window. The license identified him as James O'Connor, an IT specialist from a major city. It was a flawless alias that would hold up against any state or federal database. Whitaker snatched the license and the paperwork. He scrutinized the ID, holding it up to the glaring sun, looking for microprinting errors or peeling lamination. It was perfect. This only irritated him further. "Where are you folks headed?" Whitaker asked, leaning closer, practically sticking his head into the vehicle to sniff the air. He was searching for the scent of marijuana, alcohol, or the chemical tang of methamphetamine. He smelled nothing but leather, clean sweat, and gun oil. "El Paso," Ellison replied smoothly. "Attending a technology conference." "A tech conference?" Whitaker sneered, looking at Hale's massive, muscular frame in the back seat. "You boys don't look much like computer nerds to me." "What kind of tech?" Kane asked. "Data architecture and localized network security," Bennett spoke up from the back, her voice bright and professional. "We're independent contractors, officer." Whitaker glared at her. "I didn't ask you, Missy. I'm talking to the driver." He turned his attention back to Ellison. "You know why I pulled you over?" "I couldn't say, officer. I had the cruise control set to the limit." "You crossed the solid yellow line back there a short distance," Whitaker lied seamlessly. "Failure to maintain your lane, plus you're gripping that steering wheel awful tight. You nervous about something, James?" "Not at all, sir. Just trying to be cooperative." Whitaker hated the polite responses. He was fishing for insubordination, for a raised voice, for anything that would give him the legal cover he needed to escalate. "I'm going to need the IDs of everyone in the vehicle," Kane spoke up, his voice retaining its calm, authoritative timbre. "Officer, with respect, Texas is not a stop-and-identify state unless we are under arrest or suspected of a specific crime." My driver provided his documentation. "We'd like to receive our citation and be on our way. We have a schedule to keep." Whitaker's face flushed red. Nobody questioned his authority on that highway, let alone a black man in a rental car. He flipped the retention strap on his holster. "Listen to me very carefully," Whitaker hissed, his face inches from the window. "I don't care what kind of internet law degree you have. I smell marijuana coming from this vehicle. That gives me probable cause. Now you are all going to hand over your IDs, and then you are going to step out of this vehicle one by one. Do we have a problem?" Inside the Tahoe, the silence was absolute. The claim of smelling marijuana was a blatant fabricated lie, a well-worn tactic used by corrupt officers to bypass the Fourth Amendment. Kane looked at the dashboard clock. They had a narrow window until the encryption transfer initiated. Every second they spent indulging this deputy was a second closer to a massive national security failure. Kane made a split-second tactical decision. If they resisted the exit order, Whitaker would draw his weapon. If Whitaker drew his weapon, the team's muscle memory would kick in, and they would disarm or neutralize him in moments. That would result in a massive local police response, entirely blowing their cover and the mission. They had to play along just a little longer. "No problem at all, officer," Kane said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the friendly veneer. "We will comply. Driver first. Turn off the engine. Toss the keys out the window," Whitaker barked, stepping back and resting his hand firmly on his gun. Ellison killed the ignition. The engine died, and with it the air conditioning. The oppressive Texas heat immediately began to bake the interior of the SUV. Ellison tossed the keys onto the dusty asphalt. He opened the door and stepped out. At well over 6 feet, with the physique of a man who spent his life carrying heavy loads over hostile terrain, Ellison towered over the deputy. Whitaker took a half step back, suddenly hyper-aware of the physical disparity. "Turn around, hands on the roof, spread 'em!" Ellison complied silently. Whitaker patted him down roughly, his hand searching the waistline, the ankles. He found nothing. No weapons, no contraband. "Now the rest of you, out. Passenger side. Keep your hands where I can see them. Kane, Hale, and Bennett exited the vehicle. They moved with a synchronized, fluid efficiency that made Whitaker's stomach tighten. Regular people scrambled out of cars awkwardly. These four moved like a unified organism, placing themselves strategically along the shoulder, hands visible, eyes scanning the environment. It was textbook military spacing. "Sit on the curb," Whitaker ordered. "There is no curb, officer," Hale pointed out, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone. "Just dirt." "Then sit in the dirt," Whitaker shouted, his composure fraying. The team lowered themselves to the ground. Kane glanced down the highway. The heat waves distorted the road, but he knew time was bleeding away. Whitaker walked over to his cruiser, grabbed his radio, and spoke rapidly. "Dispatch, Unit 4. I need that backup stepped up. I've got 4 suspects out of the vehicle. They are highly organized. Requesting K9 unit if available. Unit 4, K9's currently in the northern sector, a significant distance out. Unit 7, Deputy Torres is a short distance from your location." Whitaker cursed under his breath. He didn't want to wait. He was convinced this was a massive cartel bust. He walked back to the Tahoe, stepping over the keys in the dirt. He opened the rear passenger door and leaned inside, tossing the team's duffel bags onto the highway. Clothes, toiletries, and energy bars spilled onto the dust. "Hey!" Hale barked, half rising. "You don't have a warrant." "I told you I have probable cause," Whitaker snapped, pointing his finger at Hale. "Sit your ass back down, or you'll be wearing bracelets." Kane put a restraining hand on Hale's shoulder. The gesture said, "Hold." Whitaker moved to the rear of the Tahoe and popped the trunk. He hauled it open. A triumphant grin spread across the deputy's face. Sitting in the massive cargo area were 4 large black military-grade Pelican cases. They were secured with heavy-duty biometric padlocks. Beside them were several steel ammunition cans and a rolled-up Kevlar blanket. Well, Whitaker practically whispered. "What do we have here? Tech conference, my ass. What's in the boxes, boys? Cash? Product?" "Those cases contain proprietary equipment," Kane said calmly from the dirt. "They are highly sensitive. I must insist that you do not attempt to open them. We will not consent to a search of those containers." "Ah, you don't have a choice," Whitaker laughed, high on the adrenaline of his discovery. He grabbed the padlock on the nearest Pelican case and yanked it. It didn't budge. "Give me the keys." "They are biometric," Bennett said coldly. "And you do not have authorization." Whitaker's face darkened. He unclipped his radio. "Unit 7, step on it. I've got a major seizure here. Multiple locked containers. Suspects refusing to comply." He tossed the radio back onto his belt and pulled out a heavy steel baton. "We'll see how tough these locks are." Kane's blood ran cold. Inside those cases were fully assembled, suppressed assault rifles, encrypted satellite communication arrays tied directly to the Pentagon, flashbangs, and classified dossiers containing the identities of covert operatives embedded globally. If a civilian police officer cracked those cases and saw the contents, it would trigger a mandatory federal lockdown of the highway. The FBI would have to intervene, the paper trail would hit the local courts, and Arthur Lang would be tipped off within the hour. The mission would be dead. Kane stood up. "Sit down!" Whitaker roared, dropping the baton and drawing his service weapon, leveling it directly at Kane's chest. "I said sit down, or I will put a hole in you." Ellison, Hale, and Bennett immediately shifted their weight, muscles coiling like springs. They didn't panic. They didn't raise their hands in fear. Their eyes locked onto Whitaker's weapon, calculating the distance, the angle, and the time it would take to cross the space and disarm him. It would take exactly a moment. Whitaker would manage to fire 1 round, maybe 2, before his arm was broken and he was unconscious on the pavement. Kane stared down the barrel of the gun. He didn't blink. "Officer Whitaker," Kane said, his voice echoing with a chilling, absolute authority that made the deputy involuntarily swallow hard. "You are making a catastrophic mistake. You are interfering with a matter of national security. Put the weapon down right now." "Shut up! Shut up!" Whitaker yelled, his hand shaking. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. These people weren't acting like suspects. They were acting like predators. The wail of a siren cut through the tense air. Deputy Caleb Torres's cruiser came tearing down the highway, tires screaming as it locked up and skidded to a halt at a harsh angle behind Whitaker's car. Torres, a younger, much more level-headed deputy, bailed out of his vehicle, drawing his weapon as he saw Whitaker holding a man at gunpoint. "Shane, what the hell is going on?" Torres yelled, keeping his distance. "Got a cartel transport, Caleb. They got locked cases in the trunk refusing to comply." "Suspect approached me," Whitaker shouted back, not taking his eyes off Kane. Torres looked at the four individuals. He noticed the military bearing, the lack of panic, the way they watched the weapons rather than the men holding them. His gut told him something was very, very wrong here, and it wasn't a drug bust. Kane took a slow, deliberate breath. The clock was critical. It was time to pull the ripcord. "Deputy Torres," Kane called out over the wind. "My name is Captain Elias Kane. If your partner does not lower his weapon in the next few seconds, I am making a phone call that will end both of your careers before the sun sets." Kane slowly reached his left hand toward the inner pocket of his jacket. "Hands where I can see them!" Whitaker screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I'm reaching for a secure SAT phone," Kane said, his eyes locking with Torres's. "I am going to dial the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who is currently sitting in a joint operations center with a 2-star general from JSOC. I highly suggest you tell your partner to safe his weapon." Torres hesitated, his heart pounding. The absolute certainty in Kane's voice sent a shiver down his spine. "Shane," Torres said cautiously. "Shane, hold on a second, don't shoot. He's reaching." "Hands where I can see them!" Whitaker yelled, blinded by his own adrenaline and prejudice. Kane's hand slipped into his jacket. The heavy, suffocating silence of the Texas desert was broken only by the idle rumble of Deputy Torres's cruiser and the ragged, shallow breathing of Deputy Whitaker. Kane's left hand emerged from his jacket. He didn't hold a weapon. Clutched in his palm was a matte black satellite phone, thicker than a standard smartphone, encased in ruggedized rubber. "Drop it!" Whitaker screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. His finger tightened on the trigger of his service weapon, the slack taking up. Before the firing pin could strike, Deputy Torres lunged. Torres slammed his hands down over Whitaker's wrists, forcing the barrel of the weapon toward the asphalt. The sudden, violent interference shocked Whitaker, who stumbled backward, wrestling with his own partner. "Are you out of your mind, Shane?" Torres roared, his face flushed with panic. "Look at them! Look at the gear! Look at the phone! You pull that trigger, and we are both going to federal prison for the rest of our lives." "They're cartel, Caleb. They're faking it," Whitaker spat, desperately trying to yank his arms free. But Torres was younger, stronger, and running on pure survival instinct. "They aren't cartel!" Torres yelled back, shoving Whitaker hard against the side of his cruiser. "Stand down! Right now!" While the two deputies grappled, Kane calmly pressed a single button on the SAT phone. It didn't ring. It connected instantly via a secure uplink to the Pentagon's National Military Command Center. "Actual, this is Sabre 1, Kane said, his voice completely steady, ignoring the scuffle a short distance away. "We have a code gray. Local law enforcement interference on the highway. Timeline is critically compromised. Require immediate authentication and override." A voice crackled through the phone's heavy speaker, loud enough for both deputies to hear over their shouting. It was a voice that possessed the gravelly, undeniable weight of a man who commanded thousands. It was General Victor Langford, commander of Joint Special Operations Command. "Copy, Saber 1, put the ranking officer on." Kane stepped forward, holding the phone out toward Torres, who was still pinning Whitaker against the car door. "Deputy Torres, it is for you." Torres swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. He kept his left forearm pressed against Whitaker's chest, pinning him, while he tentatively reached out with his right hand and took the heavy phone. "Hello? Hello?" Torres stammered. "Deputy, you are speaking to General Victor Langford, Department of Defense." The voice boomed from the device. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, son, because you have about a brief moment to save yourself from a treason charge. The men and women you have detained are federal operatives operating under my direct command. You are currently interfering with a Tier 1 national security operation. Your sheriff is Harlan Pierce. If you do not unhand my men, holster your weapons, and step exactly a short distance away from that vehicle, I will have the FBI hostage rescue team currently staging in the area descend on your location, and Sheriff Pierce will be answering to a Senate subcommittee tomorrow morning. Do I make myself absolutely clear?" Torres felt the blood drain from his face. His knees suddenly felt weak. "Crystal clear, General." "Sir, we're standing down." "Put Saber 1 back on." Torres shoved the phone back into Kane's hand and instantly backed away, his hands raised in the air. "Shane, put the gun away. Put it away right now." Whitaker, still breathing heavily, stared at the phone, then at Kane, and finally at Ellison, Hale, and Bennett, who had already risen from the dirt without waiting for permission. The realization was hitting Whitaker like a freight train, but his stubborn, prejudiced mind refused to fully process the humiliation. He had profiled them. He had treated them like common thugs, and he had just threatened to execute a highly decorated military commander over a bruised ego. Slowly, shakily, Whitaker lowered his service weapon and shoved it back into its holster. "Saber 1 actual," Kane said into the phone. "We are clear. What's the status on the target?" "You have a narrow window until Arthur Lang initiates the digital handshake," General Langford replied. The tension thickened his voice. "But you have a new problem. Bennett, listen up." Laura Bennett stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "I'm here, General. Your delay just cost us our operational security. Lang's compound is running a localized scanner net. They just picked up local dispatch chatter. They heard Deputy Whitaker scream about a cartel transport and locked Pelican cases on the highway. Lang is paranoid. He knows cartel runners don't use biometric locks. He's accelerating the timeline. You have a brief window to breach, or the encryption keys go to the highest bidder, and we lose our entire Eastern European intelligence network. Kane snapped the phone shut. The calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp predatory focus. "Load the gear back in the Tahoe," Kane barked. "Move." Ellison and Hale grabbed the scattered duffel bags from the dirt, shoving them back into the SUV. Bennett slid into the back seat, immediately flipping open her ruggedized laptop, her fingers flying across the keys as she tapped into the surveillance feeds. "Boss?" Bennett called out, her screen reflecting in her eyes. "If Lang is spooked by the radio chatter, he's going to have lookouts posted along the dirt roads leading to the compound. If they see a Black Fleet Tahoe rolling up, they'll light us up with heavy machine gun fire before we get within a short distance. We don't have the armor for a frontal assault." Kane stopped. She was right. The Tahoe was compromised. They needed a Trojan horse. He slowly turned and looked at Deputy Whitaker's marked cruiser. Whitaker was leaning against his car, rubbing his face, trying to process the monumental collapse of his reality. He looked up to see Kane marching toward him, the terrifying intensity back in the captain's eyes. "Give me the keys," Kane demanded. Whitaker blinked, confused. "What?" "The keys to your cruiser, Deputy. Give them to me right now." "You can't take my car." Whitaker sputtered, his indignation flaring up again. "That's county property. You can't just—" "Arthur Lang is a traitor selling state secrets that will get American operatives killed," Kane interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. "He is currently monitoring police frequencies. He expects the local cops to be tied up with the traffic stop out here. If a local sheriff's cruiser rolls up to his gate with lights flashing, his guards will hesitate. They'll think it's a noise complaint or a lost deputy. That hesitation gives my team the few seconds we need to breach the gate. I am requisitioning this vehicle under the authority of the Patriot Act and the Department of Defense. Keys now." Whitaker crossed his arms, puffing out his chest. "No, I ain't giving my cruiser to a bunch of—" He caught himself before using a slur, but the hatred was evident in his eyes. "You feds think you can just step on us and call my sheriff." Hale stepped up behind Kane. He was massive, a shadow blocking out the harsh Texas sun. "Boss, we have a brief window. Permission to forcibly acquire the transport." "Granted," Kane said without looking back. Before Whitaker could even react, Hale moved. It wasn't a brawl. It was a surgical dismantling. Hale grabbed Whitaker's right wrist, twisted it sharply, and pinned the deputy face first against the hood of the cruiser. Whitaker yelped in pain as Hale expertly unclipped the keys from the deputy's duty belt and tossed them to Ellison. "Hey! Assaulting an officer!" Whitaker screamed, his face pressed against the hot metal. Deputy Torres didn't move a muscle to help his partner. He just stood there, pale and silent, wishing he was anywhere else on Earth. Hale released Whitaker and stepped back. "We need the trunk space." Ellison hit the unlock button on the fob and popped the cruiser's trunk. "It's full of road flares and caution tape." "Dump it," Kane ordered. In a matter of seconds, the highly trained team gutted the police cruiser. Flares, first aid kits, and a spare tire were unceremoniously hurled into the ditch. They sprinted back to the Tahoe, grabbed the 4 heavy Pelican cases, and shoved them into the back of the police car. Bennett climbed into the back seat of the cruiser, wedging herself behind the plastic prisoner partition. "Leagroom is terrible in here," she muttered, already plugging a signal scrambler into the cruiser's cigarette lighter to take control of the local radio. Ellison slid into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors and familiarizing himself with the light and siren controls. Hale squeezed in beside Bennett in the back. Kane stood at the open passenger door of the cruiser. He looked back at Whitaker, who was massaging his wrist, his face a mask of fury and utter humiliation. He'd been stripped of his authority, his vehicle, and his pride, all in the span of a short time by the very men he thought he could bully. "Deputy Torres!" Kane called out. Torres snapped to attention. "Yes, sir." "You have a good head on your shoulders. I suggest you stay out here with the Tahoe and keep your partner quiet. When the dust settles, someone from the Bureau will be in touch." Kane turned his icy gaze to Whitaker. "As for you, you looked at my men and saw a stereotype. You saw an easy target. Let this be a lesson, Deputy. The walls in this world don't always look the way you want them to. Sometimes they wear rental suits. And if you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will personally make sure you spend the rest of your life answering to men who look exactly like me." Kane climbed into the passenger seat and slammed the door. "Punch it, Marcus," Kane ordered. Ellison threw the cruiser into drive, slammed his foot on the gas, and flipped the siren switch. The local sheriff's cruiser tore away from the shoulder, leaving behind a massive cloud of dust, a stranded rental SUV, and 2 deeply shaken local cops. Inside the commandeered cruiser, the atmosphere was electric. The petty annoyances of the traffic stop were instantly forgotten, replaced by the cold, calculated focus of a Tier 1 team preparing for a kinetic strike. "Short window, boss," Bennett announced from the back, her eyes locked on the digital map. "Lang's compound is a short distance down a dirt access road. There are thermal signatures at the front gate. 2 guards, heavily armed." "Marcus, "Keep the lights on," Kane commanded as he reached over the seat and popped the latches on his Pelican case, pulling out a suppressed assault rifle. He racked the charging handle, the metallic clack echoing in the cramped cabin. "We roll right up to the gate. They'll think we're local LEOs responding to the radio chatter. Hale, the second the vehicle stops, you blow the gate." "Copy that." Hale grinned, hefting a short-barreled shotgun loaded with breaching slugs. As the stolen police cruiser flew down the sun-bathed Texas highway, the siren screaming a warning to the desert, Master Sergeant Marcus Ellison tightened his grip on the wheel. They had been delayed, disrespected, and threatened. But Arthur Lang was about to find out exactly what happens when a racist cop accidentally unleashes America's most lethal hunters right at his front door. The commandeered local sheriff's cruiser tore off the paved shoulder of the highway and violently launched onto a deeply rutted, unpaved access road. The heavy suspension of the vehicle bottomed out with a sickening metallic crunch. But Master Sergeant Marcus Ellison didn't ease off the accelerator. He kept his foot buried, the speedometer hovering dangerously near the upper limit on a dirt track meant for tractors. Inside the cabin, the noise was deafening. The wail of the police siren harmonized with the roaring engine and the chaotic rattle of the heavy unsecured Pelican cases in the trunk. "Distance to target!" Captain Elias Kane shouted over the din, his eyes scanning the horizon where the sun was beginning its slow descent. From the cramped back seat trapped behind the plastic prisoner partition, Specialist Laura Bennett had her ruggedized laptop balanced precariously on her knees. The screen cast a pale blue glow over her focused features. "A short distance," she yelled back. "They definitely hear the siren now. Lang's local network just spiked with internal communications. He's asking his perimeter guards for a visual." "Keep those lights flashing, Marcus," Kane ordered, racking around into the chamber of his rifle. "Let them see exactly what they expect to see." A short distance down the road, the dust parted to reveal the outline of Arthur Lang's compound. It was cleverly disguised as an expansive, high-end cattle ranch, but the architecture gave it away to the trained eye. The perimeter fencing wasn't barbed wire. It was reinforced steel mesh. The main gate was a heavy wrought iron barricade backed by solid steel plating to stop a vehicular ramming attack. High-intensity floodlights illuminated the approach, turning the dusk into artificial daylight. Standing behind the reinforced gate were two heavily armed private military contractors. They wore unmarked desert camouflage and carried customized assault rifles. As the police cruiser came into view, its red and blue lights strobing frantically through the billowing dust, one of the guards raised a heavy pair of binoculars. "They're tracking us," Ellison said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He began to feather the brakes, intentionally mimicking the slightly erratic driving of a panicked local cop. "They haven't raised their weapons. Hold the illusion," Kane muttered, his hand resting on the door latch. "Wait for it." At the gate, the older of the two guards lowered his binoculars and hit the push-to-talk button on his shoulder radio. "Control, this is front gate. We have a visual. It's a local sheriff's cruiser, single vehicle. Lights and sirens active. Looks like that local deputy got spooked and drove up the wrong driveway. Do we engage?" Inside the compound's heavily fortified server room, Arthur Lang wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Stand down, front gate. Do not shoot a cop. Let him hit the gate, realize he's on private property, and turn around. We cannot afford a shootout with local law enforcement while the data transfer is initializing." "Copy that," the guard replied. He slung his rifle over his shoulder, a fatal mistake, and stepped toward the electronic keypad to ensure the gate was locked down. The cruiser screeched to a halt exactly a short distance from the steel-plated gate, dust washing over the windshield. The siren was abruptly cut off, leaving only the rhythmic flashing of the emergency lights and the idle rumble of the V8 engine. The guard stood on the other side of the gate, expecting a confused, angry Deputy Whitaker to step out and demand to know where he was. Instead, the rear passenger door flew open. Chief Warrant Officer Victor Hale didn't step out. He erupted from the vehicle. He moved with a terrifying explosive speed that completely shattered the contractor's perception of reality. In his hands was a customized shotgun loaded with solid, high-explosive breaching slugs. "Breaching!" Hale roared. The two guards barely had time to widen their eyes. The one who had slung his rifle scrambled to draw a sidearm, but he was light years behind the curve. Hale leveled the shotgun at the heavy steel hinges of the gate and fired twice in rapid succession. The deafening boom-boom echoed off the canyon walls. The specialized slugs detonated on impact, shearing the hardened steel hinges cleanly off their mounts. The massive gate groaned, listed sideways, and crashed inward with an earth-shaking thud. Before the dust from the fallen gate could even settle, Kane and Ellison were out of the cruiser, moving with a fluid, predatory synchronization known only to Tier 1 operators. They poured through the fatal funnel of the destroyed gate, their suppressed rifles raised and tracking. Foot to foot, two suppressed shots coughed from Kane's rifle. The guard reaching for his sidearm dropped instantly, neutralized by a double tap to the center mass of his plate carrier that knocked the wind and the fight out of him. "Perimeter clear," Ellison called out, his eyes already scanning the courtyard leading up to the main ranch house. "Davies, sit tight and kill the engines. Hook into their local network from the cruiser and find me Lang," Kane commanded through his tactical headset. "I'm in," Bennett's voice crackled in his earpiece. "He's in the basement of the primary structure. Heavy thermal shielding, but I tracked the localized power spike. The encryption transfer is at a critical percentage. You have less than a few minutes before the keys are beamed to a server overseas." "Copy, we are going loud," Kane said. Kane, Ellison, and Hale moved across the courtyard like a trio of phantoms. They didn't run. They glided, their weapons up, sweeping sectors with practiced lethality. The front door of the ranch house was a heavy oak double door. Hale stepped up, placed a slap charge against the locking mechanism, and stepped back. "Blowing it," Hale whispered. A sharp concussive crack shattered the heavy wood, blowing the doors inward off their hinges. The team flooded the main hallway. Smoke from the charge filled the air, mingling with the smell of expensive leather and cordite. From the top of a sweeping staircase, a mercenary leaned over the railing, opening fire with a submachine gun. The deafening roar of unsuppressed gunfire filled the house, rounds chewing into the drywall inches from Kane's head. "Contact upstairs!" Ellison shouted. He stepped out of the fatal funnel, angled his rifle upward, and fired a burst. The mercenary slumped over the railing, his weapon clattering down the wooden stairs. "Ignore the upper floors," Kane ordered, stepping over the debris. "Objective is in the basement. Move." They found the heavy steel door leading to the subterranean level at the end of a long, vaulted hallway. It was secured by a biometric retinal scanner. "Bennett, I have a maglock door. Retinal scan required," Kane said. "Stand by," Bennett replied from the cruiser outside. "I'm sending a localized power surge to the basement's breaker panel. It's going to fry the failsafe." 2 seconds later, a loud popping sound echoed from the other side of the steel door, followed by the heavy clunk of the magnetic locks disengaging. "Door is unsecured," Hale said, pushing it open with his boot. "Taking point." They descended the concrete stairwell into the belly of the compound. The air grew noticeably cooler, humming with the heavy vibration of industrial server racks. At the bottom of the stairs, they stacked up outside a frosted glass door. Beyond it, they could see the shadows of 2 men huddled over a bank of glowing monitors. "A brief window to complete transfer," Bennett's voice warned in their ears. Kane held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Hale kicked the glass door, shattering it into a million glittering fragments, and the 3 operators flooded the server room. "JSOC! Hands in the air! Do not move!" Kane roared, his rifle leveled directly at the head of Arthur Lang. Lang, a thin, balding man in a rumpled suit, let out a shriek of pure terror, throwing his hands over his head and backing away from the computer terminal. But the man standing next to him didn't flinch. It was Simon Reed, a disgraced former intelligence officer who now brokered stolen data for the highest bidder. Reed was a professional. He didn't panic. He simply reached inside his tailored jacket with a terrifying speed. "Gun!" Ellison shouted. Before Reed could clear his weapon from its shoulder holster, Ellison fired a single suppressed round. The bullet struck Reed in the shoulder, spinning him violently into a server rack. He collapsed to the floor, groaning in pain, his weapon skittering across the polished concrete. Kane stepped forward, pressing the hot muzzle of his rifle against Lang's chest, forcing the traitor backward until he was pinned against the cold steel of the server tower. "Arthur Lang," Kane said, his voice dropping to that lethal, terrifying register that had frozen Deputy Whitaker hours earlier. "Step away from the keyboard." Lang was trembling so violently he could barely speak. You don't understand. If I don't send the data, they're going to kill my family. Reed's buyers. They don't leave loose ends. Your family was secured by an FBI-hosted rescue team a short time ago." Kane lied flawlessly, knowing the psychological blow would break Lang entirely. "It's over, Arthur." Lang slumped, the fight completely draining out of him. He slid down the server rack, burying his face in his hands. Hale immediately moved to the primary terminal. The screen displayed a massive progress bar. Encrypting key handshake. Critical percentage. "Bennett, I'm at the terminal." Hale barked into his comms. "Transfer is at a critical point. How do I kill it?" "Do not shoot the server, Hale. The data is volatile," Bennett shouted back. "Look for a red USB dongle plugged into the master drive. It's the hardware authenticator. Yank it out." Hale's eyes scanned the chaotic tangle of wires and blinking lights. "Bennett, pull the red drive." Hale spotted it. A small, glowing red thumb drive protruding from the back of the central tower. He lunged forward, his massive hand closing around the plastic casing, and ripped it from the port. The monitors in the room flickered, froze, and then violently flashed a bright, glaring error message. Handshake failed. Connection terminated. Hale let out a long, heavy breath, dropping the USB drive into his tactical pouch. "Transfer aborted, boss. We got the keys." Kane pulled zip ties from his vest and ruthlessly bound Lang's wrists behind his back. Ellison did the same to the wounded Reed, applying a pressure dressing to the man's shoulder to keep him from bleeding out before the interrogators got their hands on him. "Actual. This is Saber 1, Kane said into his secure comms. "Primary target is secured. Secondary foreign buyer is wounded but stabilized. The data transfer has been neutralized. The keys are safe." "Copy that, Saber 1. General Langford's voice boomed back, the relief evident even over the encrypted channel. "Outstanding work. I have 3 Blackhawks from the FBI KHR-T touching down at your location in exactly a short time to secure the compound and handle the prisoners. You are clear for exfiltration." "Understood," Kane said. He looked down at Lang. The man was weeping softly. All the money, all the treason, and it had ended in a dark basement at the hands of ghosts. A short time later, the deafening roar of helicopter rotors washed over the compound. 3 sleek black FBI helicopters touched down in the courtyard, kicking up a massive storm of dust. Dozens of heavily armed federal agents poured out, swarming the ranch, securing the perimeter, and taking custody of Lang and Reed. Kane, Ellison, Hale, and Bennett didn't stick around to chat. They had a schedule to keep. They loaded back into the battered, dust-covered police cruiser and drove slowly back up the dirt access road, leaving the chaos to the Bureau. A significant distance away on the desolate shoulder of the highway, the sun had finally set, plunging the Texas desert into a deep, cold darkness. Deputy Shane Whitaker sat on the dirt, his back resting against the rear tire of the team's black rental Tahoe. He was shivering, though it wasn't from the cold. He had been sitting there for a significant amount of time. Deputy Caleb Torres stood a few yards away, arms crossed, staring out into the blackness, refusing to speak to his partner. Whitaker had tried to rationalize what had happened. He had tried to convince himself that it was a massive misunderstanding, that his sheriff would show up and chew out whoever was on the other end of that satellite phone. But as the minutes ticked by, the crushing reality of his mistake settled heavily on his chest. He had profiled the wrong men, he had threatened the wrong men, and he had just lost everything. Headlights cut through the darkness. It wasn't a local sheriff's cruiser. It was a fleet of 3 unmarked black Chevrolet Suburbans, identical to the one Whitaker had pulled over. They pulled up in a tight, aggressive formation, boxing in the rental car. The doors opened, and a half-dozen men in sharp, dark suits stepped out. They didn't look like cops. They looked like undertakers. Leading them was Special Agent Marcus Thorne, a senior liaison for the FBI's Internal Affairs and Joint Task Force Oversight Division. Thorne walked over to where Whitaker was sitting in the dirt. He didn't look angry. He looked completely, terrifyingly indifferent. "Deputy Shane Whitaker," Thorne said, his voice flat and bureaucratic. Whitaker scrambled to his feet, trying to brush the dirt off his uniform. He puffed out his chest, trying to salvage whatever shred of authority he had left. "Listen, Agent, I was just doing my job. These guys were acting suspicious and—" "Save it," Thorne interrupted, pulling a thick manila folder from under his arm. "Your Sheriff Harlan Pierce has already been briefed. As of a short time ago, you are officially terminated from the local sheriff's department." Whitaker felt his stomach drop. "You can't do that. I have union representation. I have rights." "You also have a federal warrant for your arrest," Thorne continued smoothly, ignoring the outburst. "You're being charged under Title 18, United States Code, Section 111, for assaulting, resisting, or impeding federal officers. You are also being charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and interference with a classified federal operation. You are looking at a minimum of 25 years in a federal penitentiary." Whitaker's face went completely pale. The tough guy facade crumbled instantly, replaced by the terrified realization of a bully who had finally picked a fight he couldn't win. Wait, please, it was a mistake. I thought they were cartel. I didn't know." "That," Thorne said coldly, gesturing to 2 agents who stepped forward with handcuffs, "is exactly the problem. You didn't know. You didn't care to know. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Whitaker hesitated, looking over at Deputy Torres. "Caleb, tell them I was just trying to secure the highway." Torres looked at Whitaker with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I told you to stand down, Shane. You brought this on yourself." The federal agents grabbed Whitaker roughly, spinning him around and slamming him face first against the side of the black Tahoe, the exact same way he had treated Ellison hours earlier. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the sound ringing out loudly in the quiet desert air. As they marched a weeping, broken Whitaker toward the back of a Suburban, the stolen local sheriff's cruiser came slowly rolling down the highway. It pulled over to the shoulder, the engine ticking as it idled. Captain Kane rolled down the passenger window. He looked out at the scene, the flashing lights, the federal agents, and Shane Whitaker being shoved into the back of an unmarked car. Kane locked eyes with Whitaker through the glass one last time. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just gave a slow, deliberate nod, a silent confirmation of the promise he had made. "The wolves don't always look the way you expect them to." "Marcus," Kane said, rolling the window back up and settling into his seat. "Let's go home." Ellison put the car in gear, and the team drove off into the night, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived, leaving the racist deputy to face the ultimate consequences of his own prejudice. If you loved this intense, real-life story of instant karma and high-stakes justice, you have to let us know. Drop a like on this video to support the channel and share it with your friends to show them what happens when prejudice meets ultimate authority. Did you expect the team to commandeer the police cruiser? Let me know your favorite twist down in the comments. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on more thrilling, action-packed stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and stay sharp.